We Brits have always been suckers for coupes. After all, we bought the Ford Capri in huge numbers when the rest of Europe derided it. Vauxhall had to set up a new factory for the Celica in Finland to satisfy our demands. So why do we like them so much? Well, in theory, they combine all the attributes of a saloon car and without the overt, I must recapture my youth image of a ragtop. We've got two of the best on show here at the castle, Peugeot's 406 Coupe and Volvo's C70. The C70 will make any Volvo-loving architect or accountant's toes curl. It's beautiful, well, for a Volvo, with those muscular, smooth and sensual lines which tell you all about the car's dynamic abilities, and yet retaining the all-important traditional elements, so the grille and the V-shaped bulge across the bonnet still look very familiar. The 406 Coupe has stunning good looks, and unlike the C70, it doesn't really reflect any traditional Peugeot traditions, except the badge on the grille. It's a unique combination of Pininfarina pen design and a certain Gallic flair. Volvo haven't exactly been renowned for their coupes in the past. If you're as old as me, you'll remember the Saint swanning around in a P1800. But that was then, and this is now. So why have Volvo gone back to the coupe concept after 20-odd years? Well, it's a result of a collaboration between their British designer, Peter Horbury, and Tom Walkinshaw's TWR racing outfit, who did the engineering on this car. Now, I have to say, for such a great-looking car, the interior is a bit of a disappointment. I think the trouble is the colour, and this uniform dull grey with dark wood actually makes you feel rather depressed when you look at it. And the instrument layout is hardly ergonomic. The switches seem rather scattered around, and you're not quite sure where everything is. Very, very good hi-fi system. The sound is absolutely perfect, but all the controls are down here on the set itself, and you have to look down at it and fiddle around as you're driving along. And I always feel in that situation you're about to look up and find ERF being printed across your forehead. The seats are very comfortable and very supportive, but you'd expect no less in a Volvo. There's three versions of Volvo's 5-cylinder engine on offer in the coupe. First comes the naturally aspirated 170 brake horsepower unit, then there's the low pressure turbo version which churns out 193 brake horsepower, and if you're a real petrol head you can go for the full-blooded 240 brake horsepower version which gives you sub 7-second 0 to 60 performance. So Volvo have gone all slick and sporty, yet somehow managed to retain an air of awkwardness, safety and stability. Not a bad motor, one that will turn heads at traffic lights and in the executive car park, not just because it's so pretty, but because it's a Volvo. This is the 170 brake horsepower version in what they call the touring chassis. Performance perfectly adequate, 0 to 60 in around 9 seconds. Handling, well, it's smooth and quiet and relaxed, as you'd expect for a car of this size and weight. If you go for the 240 brake horsepower version, then they strap the chassis down into sports mode and fit ultra low aspect ratio tyres. The result is that you feel every nook and cranny in the road surface, but you can pretend you're a BTC racer. Volvo, like most of the prestige marques, have been generous with the range of standard equipment offered with the C70 Coupe at a cost. These extras include alloy wheels, anti-lock brakes, a pollen filter, electric and heated door mirrors, and a very powerful stereo with CD player that's perfect when you pull up at the traffic lights. So that's the C70 Coupe. Not a great car, but certainly not a bad car either. Best described as a conservative sports coupe, but if you're a Volvo driver, you'll probably love it. So, what's the competition like from La Belle France? When the 406 Coupe was first launched, some of my colleagues in the motoring press expressed disappointment that the interior looked pretty much the same as the 406 Saloon. So we received an exotic press release the other day saying that Peugeot have upgraded the 406 Coupe for the millennium. Basically meant they put some chrome strips around the outside of the instruments, they changed the position of the stereo and the air conditioning switches, and then given the gear lever an aluminium top. If that's all the millennium means to Peugeot, Lord help us. Anyway, it still looks pretty much the same as the old 406 saloon, but for the drop-dead good looks of the car, you're willing to forgive it anything. It must be said, the 406 Coupe is a very nice car indeed, and sales are bearing witness to it. According to Peugeot, the Coupe has the same wheelbase as the 406 saloon, but derives its own distinct appearance by being 5 centimetres lower, 4.9 centimetres longer at the front, and 3.2 centimetres shorter at the rear, making it 1.7 centimetres longer than the saloon. It's all very interesting, but what really gives it its own distinctive appearance is that Pininfarina design. This is the 194 brake horsepower 3-litre V6 version of the 406 Coupe, and I think this engine suits the Coupe's looks far better than the alternative 2-litre unit. Not to put that down too much, I mean, still the car does 137 miles an hour, but in this version with the V6 you've got almost 150 mile an hour performance and a 0 to 60 figure below 8 seconds. And it seems to really press on. The 406 Coupe prices start at £20,875 on the road for the 2-litre versions, rising to £22,695 for the SE version, £24,270 for the V6 and £27,020 for the V6 SE top spec. Now that compares with £25,665 for the basic 2.4-litre C70 and £30,965 for the top spec T5. So, which of these delectable coupes to choose? Now, I've always been a Pininfarina fan. I used to think that great Italian design house's best was the Fiat 130 Coupe, but with the 406, they've surpassed themselves. The car looks so good on the road. Not to say the Volvo's a bad car, but it's very expensive. It hasn't been selling too well, we hear, and the depreciation at the moment in the trade guides is pretty fierce. So for me, it has to be the 406. But I wouldn't have it in this colour.
There's an old phrase that goes, "All roads lead to Rome," which is perhaps why Toyota have chosen to launch the latest version of the Celica here. Coupes are one of the most stylish types of automotive fashion. Every girl should have one in her wardrobe. They offer a great blend of performance and good looks that guarantee them a place on the catwalk. But some models, like Toyota's Selica, are looking less chic designer label and more high street fashion in need of an update. Enter a swanky Californian design studio, some inspiration from American muscle cars, and hey presto, this season's model is on the catwalk. The Celica started life back in that decade that taste forgot, the 70s. Thankfully, it's moved with the times. This is the 7th generation and it's the best looking version in years. The whole look is very American. The styling of the Celica Coupe is down to a technique called cab forward. Basically, this means that the character of the car takes its inspiration from the open-wheel race cars. The bold lines emphasise performance, the wheelbase is extended, with the overall length to create a wheel at each corner approach, similar to that of a real racer. It's also shorter than the previous models, which helps to enhance the sporting style. Inside, well, to be honest, it's a bit of a disappointment, really. It might be comfortable and it might have the levels of equipment that you expect of a car in this class, but stylish it certainly isn't. It's a kind of hodgepodge of angles and different shapes. There is far too much of John Major's favourite colour and a complete overload of plastic. And although there is enough room for me as the driver and for the front seat passenger, unless you're planning on carrying children in the back seats, you can forget it. If you're considering getting a Celica, you should have a good long think about exactly what you want it for. You can't really take all the kids and the pet dog camping in this. And even though it has a strong rally tradition, it isn't an out-and-out sports car. It's probably best described as a sports tourer. You're not going to get out-and-out white-knuckle ride excitement, but you'll strike a conservative balance between sports handling and a comfortable, smooth ride. This is the 1.8-litre 16-valve engine. Believe me, it doesn't feel like a 1.8. It has plenty of kick and a very smooth delivery. The 140 brake horsepowers make this a much quicker car than the old model. You're not going to reach excessive speeds, but the engine really does feel very refined. The handling is agile and responsive, and because of the low stance you feel extremely involved in the drive. The 6-speed gearbox is very snappy, and this adds to the appeal. This really is a very eager car. It seems to want to show you what it can do. The Celica is fantastic fun on open roads, but it's a bit too enthusiastic if you get stuck in traffic in the city, which happens an awful lot in Rome. Now, the Toyota may not have the flair of the Fiat Coupe or the out-and-out aggression of the Ford Kuga, but instead it offers a good value for money package that combines great looks with performance. And after all, that's just what you want in a coupe. You can get your hands on the 1.8 standard model for an on-the-road price of £19,255. That's cheaper than both the Kuga and the Fiat. The Toyota Selica is a stunning-looking vehicle. It's full of distinctive, sharp angles with a very potent chassis. My only criticism is that in terms of performance, it is a slight underachiever. Still, you can take comfort in the fact that it looks the part. And darlings, in the world of fashion, that's what counts.
There's no doubt, Mercedes-Benz is one of the most prestigious marques that money can buy. They've built their reputation with a whole range of very solidly engineered saloons, coupes, two-seater sports cars, even off-roaders along the way. The thing is that other drivers that you meet on the road will react in one of two ways, either with admiration and respect, or utter contempt tinged with envy. Now, as far as the interior is concerned, certainly at first glance it is a quality motor car. That shows all over. But this black wooden trim here, which costs £1,000 extra, by the way, is not only prone to reflections, but in certain places they haven't even made it fit properly. The glove box over here has got to be the smallest one you've ever seen in your life. There's the service book and the instruction manual, and you won't get anything else in there, possibly not even a pair of gloves. This centre console lifts up for dual storage capacity, but the lid rocks and rolls and wobbles around like it's a 15-year-old Range Rover that's had a hard life down on the farm, and quite frankly that really isn't good enough. These seats certainly don't look anything special, very nice brown leather, but for £3,000 as an optional extra, you'd think they could make them look a little more special, and many people who've been a passenger in this car say these seats are just far too firm. Me personally, I like that, but it's not to everybody's taste. And overall, the feel of it is not as good as it should be in a car of this class. As far as quality is concerned in the fit and fitments department, a new Golf would certainly give this a good run for its money. And of course, because it's a Mercedes, things like the door shut are just absolutely wonderful. Gentle push, and it should shut. But in fact, it doesn't. And you have to give it quite a good hard slam before it finally does. Don't know why, but there you are. Overall, though, the lines are absolutely fantastic. This is one good-looking car, but then I like coupes anyway. They always look nicer than a saloon with these graceful, sweeping lines. The boot is more than big enough to put in your golf clubs for a round with Rafe. And let's face it, this certainly wouldn't be out of place in the golf club car park now, would it? A gorgeous looking car, and it just exudes quality. These alloy wheels, by the way, fitted to this particular car are an extra. It's only really when you come round to the front of the car that things begin to look any out of the ordinary. And it certainly does look different from any other coupe on the road. You're left in no doubt that that's a Mercedes coming up behind you in your rear view mirror. Apart from the three-pointed star, you've also got these oval headlamps and the distinctive Mercedes grille from the E-Class on which this is based. Now, in passing, let me just say that I never liked these oval headlamps. I think they look gloopy on this particular car. They work rather well with the Jaguar, but perhaps that's because the Jaguar also has an oval grille to match instead of an oblong one. I never liked the look of this, and I don't think I ever will. However, with the waiting list that there is for these vehicles, clearly they've got something right. There are 3 engines available. Either side of the 230 compressor we tested are the entry-level 200, a 2-litre 4-cylinder engine, and the 320, a smoother, more powerful 3.2-litre V6, which will cost you around £5,000 more than this car. Now this is the CLK 230 compressor, which is a 2.3-litre engine with a supercharger, which is a little bit like a turbocharger, except that instead of being driven by the exhaust gases, it's driven either by belts or pulleys directly from the engine, so it's available in theory all the time to give the maximum boost to performance. And therefore, for a 2.3-litre engine, this thing pumps out close to 200 bhp and is quite torquey too, even at low revs. That's the benefit of the supercharger. So in terms of out-and-out performance, for a 2.3-litre engine, it's not at all bad. If you've got a bit more money to spend, you could get the V6 version of this, and then you really are looking at serious bucks. Also, there is a 2-litre non-turbocharged or supercharged engine available, but that really is a little bit underpowered. I've got to admit to you that I always have a problem assessing ride and handling qualities in a coupe. For one simple reason, what exactly does coupe mean? Does it just mean, as the French word literally means, cut off in the body style? Or does coupe also imply that there should be something kind of sporty about a vehicle? Well, my guess is, yes, it does. And if that's the case, these large coupes really have a big problem, because although the ride is very, very firm, actually quite harsh. It almost jars your fillings out over the bumps and the potholes, and you certainly feel every undulation in the road. The ride, as a consequence, isn't actually that good. There's quite a lot of body roll on the corners, and turn-in, which again you wouldn't expect to be absolutely pin-sharp as if it was an out-and-out sports car, really isn't that good. The steering is quite dull and lifeless. That said, perhaps because of the size and the feel of the car, it does inspire you with confidence. You feel safe in this car, and you feel good. So who would be buying a car like this? Well, clearly somebody who's reasonably well heeled, because with all the extras on it, this vehicle is around £42,000, which is quite a lot of dosh, though you can get one for more like 30. I guess really it's kind of an E-Class with a smile on its face. It's an E-Class for people who want a little bit more fun. And perhaps it would sell well to empty nesters, or maybe a young executive with 2 young children who can put up with the relative paucity of room in the back. At £30,000, the Mercedes-Benz CLK certainly isn't overpriced, but remember, it's only £30,000 before you start to load it with goodies. But for around about that price, you can also get yourself a Jaguar S-Type or a BMW 3-litre CSI Coupe. And quite honestly, both of those have got a better overall package where ride and handling and performance is concerned. And you see, that's where I think Mercedes have now got a problem, because other people are catching up fast in that key area of build quality and reliability, and therefore Mercedes-Benz, if they're going to keep that edge, have got to get it right in areas like engines, ride, handling, performance. Quite honestly, with this car, they haven't done that.
It is beautiful, isn't it? When Peugeot commissioned Pininfarina to design the new 406 Coupe, it must have been like lighting the touch paper on a firework, sitting back and waiting. And when the ensuing explosion arrived, they must have been delighted. It does withstand closer examination like any piece of sculpture, and these small buttresses down the rear of the window architecture hint at something special. The clean lines of the rear are continued around the sides with just a subtle swelling at the haunches, and then little else down the sides to the front of the car, where the nose is quietly confident and assertive, perhaps, rather than overtly aggressive. These lines down the bonnet, well, you don't even notice them until you stare closely at the front of the car, and they define the shape of the front of the car. It's all very subtle and very elegant and results in a very beautiful car, which makes it all the more surprising that Peugeot decided to kit it out with the interior from an old Parisian taxi. The dash is more or less taken straight from the standard 406, the only real difference being these chrome bezels surrounding the dials, which is hardly the stuff of fantasy. Then underneath we have a strata of this odd, shiny, scratchy plastic, and then right underneath, on the centre console, we have a reappearance of the dreaded elephant hide plastic that's seen adorning the interior of the 206, and I don't like it at all. Mind you, it is a genuine four-seater. There's room in the back of the car for two proper grown-ups, and there's a really neat trick for getting them in and out. Forward and back, and forward and back. I'm sure I could break it eventually, but it would probably take me ages. So, is it just a pretty face? Is all of this just makeup, or is its beauty more than skin deep? Has the 406 Coupe got what it takes to cut the mustard when you hit the road? In short, yes, it has. This is the 3-litre V6 engine version, an engine that actually makes an appearance in a great many cars. There's the Atlantic Venturi, a French supercar, the Renault Espace and Laguna, to name but a few, and then of course the 406 Saloon and Coupe. Though I have to say, for whatever reason, it seems to make the least interesting noise in this car of all the other cars that it's fitted to. That said, it is a stonker of an engine. There's bags of torque, and once you get it fully on song, it does start to make a reasonably attractive snarl as you progress at speed. Otherwise, the chassis feels fluid and compliant and is a pleasant drive whilst being sporty at the same time. You are aware of that long wheelbase. It's quite a nice car to progress swiftly rather than perhaps cane it around the very tightest of roads. The steering is precise, though I don't like the angle of the steering wheel. It's tilted too far this way. It feels rather like driving a truck at times, and that can't be adjusted out. And the gear lever seems to have the longest throw imaginable. You need arms about 6 foot long. That said, once you engage the gear, it does snick in quite nicely for you. Peugeot are very good at building drivers' cars. They've proved it time and time again. And it's just as well that the 406 is no exception, given the car's sporting looks. But I'd like to introduce an annoying pseudo-philosophical argument here. The 406 Coupe is a beautiful car. It's also a mainstream car, and beauty is seldom mainstream. Some of the cars acknowledged to be the most beautiful in the world, well, part of their appeal is due to their rarity and exclusivity. Now, the 406 Coupe might be the kind of car that sends the fleet manager disappearing to the toilet with a picture of it, but it can hardly claim to be any sort of piece of automotive exotica. That's what's led it to become almost invisible on the road.